welcome to another day of chess and psychology. Man, it's already July, isn't it? Whoa. Alright, so hopefully today you are gonna have some fun looking at some games that makes you think if you should castle or not. That's something that when I've been playing the viewers, there's a lot of questions about my choice of castling when it comes to chess 960, so I kind of got inspired by that. So yeah, generally castling is good, but we are gonna look at some different ideas today. So the first one let's look at is Carlsen versus Wang in 2009. This is a pretty cool game. I assume you already know that they're not going to castle, so that's not the question. But the question is how Carlsen managed to play this game very beautifully and to actually make that decision. Because usually making that decision to castle or not is the hard thing, but we can all just not castle and play some interesting-ish game. So let's jump right in. Alright, so Carlsen is white and very normal opening, very just normal stuff, some cool stuff, some cool Slav, whoa, and I'm not the biggest fan of playing d4 first move, so this is not my area of expertise, but I do really enjoy the middle game that they got. I really like how white has more space already, the pawn structure. These really do go with my chess philosophy. So that's another great thing to think about. If you have any comments or would like to discuss the opening more, feel free to just let me know and we can do that too. But so far everything seems very normal. Black at some point is going to be playing e6 and to get the bishop out eventually. I assume there should be a b6 somewhere, right? Because this pawn is really strong and the bishop is pretty blinded. So those are the general ideas that I assume. Probably b6 could be met by b4, could just take, whoops. So there are different ideas. And hello, Baljeet. Yes, so if you were wondering if black did play this b6, yes he did. And b6 is a very interesting idea because, as we just mentioned, he kind of wants to open it up. It was kind of like, it's more like a Slav that then the bishop just landed on f4 because of the c6 part. But yes, and the bishop, whoops, I'm still used to lead chess. And the bishop also did come to f5, so it's, I do feel like it was very, everything was played pretty logically. So this is also the 11 years ago opening, so things have been updated ever since. And alright, so my first question, do you think white should take the pawn or would you want to play b4 as white? Let me know which one would you prefer. And we've talked about this, b4 kind of keeps the tension, but if you were to play b4, then there could be a5s, and this is just still an ongoing. You could technically play a3, but now even if everything gets taken, it's still interesting because the bishop is strong. But I'm not sure if black would want that to take everything. Black would just try and keep the tension. So I also do like b4, and taking the b6 pawn takes a lot of understanding to do, which Magnus did have, and he did play c takes b6. So let me show you why. C takes b6, well, taking with the queen is the best option. Then you play rook b1. So you do want to play in the queen side, but not necessarily to keep everything closed, because if everything is closed, then your two bishops are not really doing much. The simplest way to think about it. And oh, hello Joseph. All right, what else we got? So logically after take, now it's the bishop's turn to come out somewhere. So e6, very logical. Same for the f1 bishop. Let's open it up. Now black to move. Do you think it's a good idea to get the bishop out, play something like c5, a5? Do you want to move the knights, basically black to move? Which one do you want to do? Keep in mind, black to move. I know we're looking at it as the white side because we all want to be Magnus, right? Alright, yeah, I like that. Thank you, Gavin. c5 is very pretty interesting. Definitely candidate move to think about. I feel like something like bishop b4 is also interesting, but what next? You can just play like... You could just play a3, take, take. Now the rook is also attacking the queen, so it feels kind of pointless. And something like bishop a5 is a blunder. So those are the things to look out for. But and the other good thing is, if the bishop can't come to b4, whoops. If the bishop can't come to b4, then what? Bishop e7? The bishop doesn't really serve any purpose on e7, unless you could try to get it to f6, but then again, it's still a blind spot. So that is why it is better to just play c5 and try to get this bishop out in a better place, or maybe play something like bishop d6 to exchange the bishops. Right? This kind of makes sense to me. It feels like it's following a nice pattern. g5, knight e4. g5 doesn't make sense right now, be easy, because just what if g5 take? I mean, what would you do after that? So I'm not the biggest fan of giving free material. I like sacrifices, but this is not a sacrifice. What else we got? Alright, so yeah, c5 does make perfect sense to me. And after c5, so as white, I'm not going to take this. This is just, no, ain't gonna happen. First things first, let's just look at it like a pure, just being able to just develop better. Let's say you take with the knight. Next, you have knight e4 coming up. Another thing to think about, what if you take with the bishop? Next, e5 could be coming up. You would give black way too many chances to develop and put the pieces in better places. So we don't want that. We just want to be able to develop, put our pieces in better places, and not let opponents get very slippery. Alright, I see the idea with knight h5. Let's just go back a second. Knight h5, I understand that you want this bishop, but what if just bishop h2? Just kind of keeps the bishop over here, still has the diagonal. I would just... knight h5 doesn't really pose a threat, especially because eventually you do have to go back, because this knight isn't doing anything up here. So, but thank you for sharing. Okay. What else? Okay, so let's say e3, c5, and now what to do with white? We said we don't want to take that, right? So if we don't want to take it, we still have to be able to somehow attack it. Now how? Sure, anytime. Thank you for speaking up, Sahar. We could consider something like knight a4. Then knight a4, it's definitely interesting, but what, let me delete that. But what would you do if knight a4 just queen a5 check? You kind of have to either come back with your knight, play something like b4, or queen d2 is a blunder because of your knight over here. Oops, right? So knight a4, I like the idea of knight a4, don't get me wrong, but I feel like it's a little premature, so you can like prepare it better. It feels a little raw. So I do like, thank you everybody for sharing thinking about knight a4. I do like that. I wanted to sack the double pawn so you could flank at a dark square. Be easy. That's an interesting idea with g5 and the bishop g7. But your bishop on g7 still wouldn't serve a purpose. It would just be looking at the d4 pawn. Maybe some e5s later, but it's not worth it. It's you need to keep your your bishop still does have another way to go. Like bishop d6 is still possible. I'm still answering be easy, just FYI. Okay, so I like the idea knight a4. I like that. Thank you, Manish, for mentioning queen d2 then knight a4. But there is a little trickier way to be able to play this queen, to be able to play this knight a4 and attack the queen. So how do you think you could do that? It is not queen d2, and we already said we don't like d takes c5. We already said we're looking to be able to play knight a4. That's an interesting idea to play queen a4 and knight b5. Alright, let's take a look. What would you do if queen a4? The first thing that comes to mind is this bishop d6, because I feel like this bishop d6 is a big idea that black has. And if take knight b5, there's could be just queen c6, just stopping it all. And now possibly trying to take that. If not take, if you play knight b5, still could just take your bishop. So I think queen a4 with the idea knight b5 is interesting, but bishop d6 kind of stops it. Bishop d3. Interesting, but bishop d3, what if something like c4? Would you have to just play like bishop c2 and then like bishop b4? I mean, it's interesting, but it just doesn't really seem like it's that helpful. Alright. Okay, let's go back to here. So I still like the idea knight a4. So we could just consider a3 with the idea knight a4. Ooh, I just got something interesting. I got a comment about if bishop d3 take on d4. That's definitely pretty cool. What if take, queen take, like bishop e3? Still, queen could go to e5, now d4 is coming. Looks very scary for both sides, to be honest. Because if I castle, now this rook could become a little worrisome, I guess. But yeah, I think black could technically just take here and chill. I'm thinking if I could just play knight a4, but not really. There's queen a5. This is the line I was just thinking about. But like if there was a bishop d2, that would be pretty cool, right? But well, that can't happen. So yeah, technically bishop d3 could be also refuted because of take. Yeah, I don't see any ways to stop it. So a3 is the best one. Sorry. Another question that was about queen a4, and I talked about bishop d6. Are you talking about take, knight b5, queen c6 line? Because you say knight c7 and I can pick it up. Right? That's a free knight. And if you are talking about knight b5 over right now, it still can be taken. So I see your idea. I see that you are thinking about checks, which is pretty cool. I like it when people think about checks. Makes me proud. But it would be a pretty cool check if this knight wasn't here. If this knight was somewhere else, it would be a pretty cool check. You are good. Alright. Let's go back. And now let's look at our a3. So a3 is pretty awesome because now it's supporting this knight a4 idea. And we like that because, first of all, gets us space. Second of all, it's not just about the knight a4. You want this knight a4 to be able to actually attack the pawn and ideally be able to exchange that lot of stuff over here. So let's say opponent plays bishop d6. You do your knight a4. Careful, queen a5 doesn't work because of b4. If take, there's just take too. Pretty cool, huh? So careful with that. Queen c7. No, you can take and exchange the knights over here. So this is actually what happened in the game. And as you can see, both kings are uncastled. Black king is closer to castling than white king is. But the main question right now to try and figure out is, what do you want to do with white? Because if your goal is to castle, you can just play bishop d3 and castle. But if your goal is to try and keep an attack, or like a little bit more exciting than just bishop d3 castle, you do have an interesting move. And yes, someone, Be Easy in the chat, also did say mates, checks, and threads candidate moves. Yeah, I think you meant make checks and threads candidate moves, but mates are also good candidate moves, right? All right, so yeah, thank you for everyone who are participating. Yep, queen a4 is the best one. Queen f3 is also, I think it's interesting, but queen f3, my first question is, what would you do after queen c2? Because now queen c2, you gotta like think about your rook. Do you want a rook c d1, lose some pawns, or you want to just play queen d1? I don't like this. So I don't really also see what is queen f3 doing. What is your idea with queen f3? Because you just want to keep it close to the king. You don't necessarily need to do that right now. You can just give this queen a4 check. And if knight d7, now this king is not going to castle next move, so you can just play bishop d3, right? So this is pretty interesting. I think I really like this because you give me 2-3 moves and I get my rook on c1, and this is already pretty satisfying, right? I was thinking if there isn't any way to trick opponent into bishop b5, but you can't do that right now because of queen b5. So another line that I was thinking about was potentially playing this, trying to play rook c1, but with like bishop d3, maybe king up during rook c1, something like that. Just some trying to bounce ideas, because if knight d7, if I play like bishop d3, what if opponent just plays queen d6? Wait, queen d6? Now there's bishop b5. So not queen d6. What if opponent just plays rook d8 to try and castle? Well, we can eat that right there. So what if rook a7? To try and defend d7? That was what I was trying to get at. And so yeah, I don't know if bishop d3 is fast enough. We could try to castle, but then he also castles, and yeah, technically we do have the pawn majority. Technically the game is in two sides. It's better to have bishop than the knight, but it feels too easy, right? Castling is too chill. We need something more exciting. So that's why I was actually thinking about potentially king d2. Again, emphasis on potentially, because it is cool, but you are following the idea of c1. Bishop d3 is kind of covering your king up, but I would much rather have bishop on d3, king on e2, so that if my king needs to go back to f1, it can. So that's those are just some brainstorms to keep in mind later on. So in the game, knight d7 was not played, and they just played king e7. Wang, you just played king e7, and so now we get our bishop d3. So bishop d3, the idea is pretty clear. I need to develop this bishop. I might want to castle, but since black didn't castle, if white was to castle, next move is automatically going to be g5, g4. So white is also not going to castle, and that's why this game is pretty cool. Ooh, hello Chessweeb. How's it going? So yeah, we were talking about king e7 and another cool king move from white. So here is a very very interesting position, because now black has a chance to try and push a little, because for example, let's say we play a5 with black, right? So let's say a5. What do you want to do with white? The first thing you would think about is castle, right? Because there are no logical checks, no easy way to threaten anything or eat anything, so probably something like castle. So Sahar, pretty good that you thought about g3 and bishop g2 then castling, but the issue is that you kind of need your bishop to be somewhere closer to the center rather than g2, because you also want it to be able to maneuver on the queen side. But if a bishop is on g2, the pawn on d5, so imagine your bishop is on g2. The pawn on d5 is just kind of blocking it, so it's not the best place for the bishop. I hope that helps. And all right, so let's say we think about castling, right? Now black gets to play just rook c8. And now you, as white, you don't really have this rook c1 anymore, right? This doesn't work. So black finished development. Everything is cool. Now if you were to play rook c1, take, king up, rook b8, now attacking your pawn. Whoa, sorry, that was my mouse slip. Everything is good. And let's look at this a little bit deeper, okay? Just to get a better idea of why Magnus decided not to castle. So, and yes, I agree with you, Bashar, we do need to castle. We do need to get a rook on c file. Whoa, there was a, I just contradicted myself, didn't I? My point was that I was thinking of castling to get the rook to c1, but we don't necessarily have to castle to get the rook to c1. Oh, hello, Kids Channel. All right, so let's just look at this a little bit more. Let's say you get to eat on on a5, you lose your b2 pawn. Let's say you play b4, take, knight d7. What next? If you play b5, I mean, you're like you are threatening a little bit if white were to play some weird stuff. But everything is already kind of defended. I hope that kind of clears it up. All right, let me put it this way. As white in this position, you cannot make improvements. You cannot advance your position, and that is the biggest reason of why there is this huge fight for the c file. And that is why something like king castle doesn't necessarily work, because of rook c8, right? So that is why after a5 we don't want to castle, but we want to get the rook to c file. So what do you think we should do? That kind of gives the moves away, right? But I still would like to hear it from you. So the choices I'm giving you are king e2 and king d2. Which one would you want to play with, white? Let me put it out here too. We got this and we got this. Which one do you want? Alright, so I got two king d2 so far. Oh, I have all king d2s. Whoa. Alright, so I have few e2s and a lot of d2s. Alright, I like this. A lot of different ideas. Let's jump in. So, in the game, Magnus played king e2. But let me tell you why not king d2. So, king d2 is also interesting, but the problem is kind of like if rook c8, still rook c1, queen b6. White is a little bit better, but it's not anything super. And the great thing is that if the king is on e2, it lays a little bit of trap. So king d2 is good, but it's not the best one because to me it's not as tricky, and that's why it's not good. and you see it's supporting it, but it also gives chances for future checks. I hope that in my game I wouldn't be playing king d2 and I would be able to understand what's the difference, but I can only hope because I haven't actually gotten to that position. But yeah, king d2 is the best one. Let me tell you why. If rook c8, you still do rook c1, and now you're laying a trap, because if take, now this is what happened in the game. And it was better for black to just play queen b6 again. Remember when the king was on d2, queen b6 was why we didn't do it? Okay, so king e2 is laying a trap because of if take, now you get b4. Remember when we were castled in the same exact position, white had to waste the time playing king h2, right? In this position, just try to imagine it. If white castled instead of king e2, we had to play king h2. But now that the king is on e2, the king is closer to center, closer to the queen side, that we have this small pawn majority. So that's pretty interesting, right? Now we get to play b4. So let's say b4, there are some choices for black. Well, taking is none of them, because, well, this is a pinned. You don't want to give free pieces, right? So, I'm glad to see that king e2 is making sense to some people, to some of my people who I see the comments. That is great. So, all right, let's say here after b4, what should black do? Let me tell you some ideas. First of all, you gotta be careful, because as black, you have to be able to try and stop the queen side while advancing something in the center, because the king side you can't really advance much. So, okay. Now, let's think, what would black want to do? There are no checks, there are no rook b8, rook b8 just, I can just pick it up over here. So, be careful not to blunder like that as black. Knight e4, interesting. Ooh, James Pratt, nice. e5 is pretty cool. e5 is nice because you are threatening to push more in the center where the king is, right? So if you get the chance to maybe big maybe, do something like this, whoa. You could potentially start bringing more stuff towards the king. So I like e5, but let's look at something like, what if e5, I played king d2, rook c8, I just take the pawn, and this is still playable for black, but white is also better, so it's a good fight. Let's put it that way. But because the pieces for both sides are pretty active, white has a clear idea trying to push the pawns, but at least the pawns are not connected, right? So that's a big plus, having taken that away from white. Let's see, what if e5, I choose to play, if I choose to take. Then there's rook b8, now rook b2s are coming up, so gotta be careful with that. You don't really want to give your opponent activity, especially when there are two rooks against the queen. Generally, you don't really want to give your opponent much to play with, but this is also, yes, knight e4 is also another interesting idea, but if you were to play knight e4 instead of e5, I could simply just take that, and I do like the idea of taking or playing b5, but even if I don't take it, I could just move the queen away. Something like queen b3 seems possible, but I understand. Knight e4, I would most likely take it as well. Another thing that comes to mind is, what if just king tries to run away? If now knight c3, there could be just queen c6, some queen c7 threats. Yeah, this is pretty interesting. Thank you for bringing it up. Knight e4, however, take, and something like b5 should be good enough, because now queen e4 is coming, b6 is coming. I like that. All right, let's go back to our e5 that we were talking about. So e5, let's say I play queen b5. You double the rooks up, sorry. You bring the rook back. You can't double them up yet because, well, that's a threat. Queen b7 is also a threat. A lot of threats. Let's not give free pawns like that. If you bring your rook back, now one thing to think about could be taking, but taking not the best idea, because what do you want to do with your queen? Let's say you play queen a4, there's rook b2, right? You can't necessarily do this, and you can't also do that. So you have to be very careful. Let's say you will go queen a6, and the next move, knight c5 is coming, so it's definitely interesting, but yes, exactly, thank you. The king is very uncomfortable. So that is why e5 would give black better fighting chances compared to king f8 that was played in the game. So another thing to think about is, you see how black king is running away and white king is staying in the center. That's another thing to think about, that black feels scared trying to run away with the king while white feels more comfortable. Here's some psychology for you, that the king, just something about the players. I'm not saying like Carlsen is a better player than Wang, which he, let's face it, in this game he was, but it's not necessarily about the overall experience in this specific game. In this specific game, in this specific position, black psychologically felt pretty under pressure, and while white is comfortable having the king on e2, black is running away with the king. So how do you interpret that, right? Okay, so the way I interpret it, okay, I can't pronounce for the life of me. We've covered that topic all along, but you get it. There are a lot of non-native English speakers here, so I don't feel lonely, but my point being that king f8 shows that black is uncomfortable psychologically, so wants to just run away, and that's something that you could use in your own games. Okay, let's see what happened in the game. Let's say if you take on a5, which did happen in the game, king g8, it's already not very, it doesn't feel that feisty to try and just, what are you doing with your king? Like, I don't understand, honestly, why the king is running away. I think this king would have been way useful in this, like, e7 than on g8. But I also understand that the king on e7 would mean more checks, would mean more things to look out for, while the king on g8, there would be only one, like the checks on the back rank. So I kind of understand it, but I hope I never do it in my game like this. Okay, but we all agree that black is under pressure, right? Okay, so let's say white keeps pushing the pawns, and now the push is stopped. But how can white try and advance his position even more? So basically, you want to create more problems for your opponent. How? Whoops. No, I gave it away. Mouse slip. No. All right. I hope you were thinking about queen movement. There we go, I got a queen b5, and I am going to keep my hands off of the mouse when I ask questions from now on. Okay, so I kind of like the idea of queen b5 because you're bringing your queen closer, but the one thing it's kind of hard to understand sometimes is that, yes, even though your pawn on a6 is pretty strong and it's kind of keeping these rooks preoccupied, you don't really have a way of advancing it, so you could just keep that pawn over there and bring your pieces to the other side of the board to try and advance position over there and like poke a little bit more problems there. Ah, thank you, Sahar. Okay, so queen d4 is also interesting. You're centralizing your queen. You could want to play queen b6 later. Same thing when I liked the idea of queen b5, queen b6. That's pretty interesting too. So queen f4 is the best one though. You are trying to create more problems, and let's say it goes a7. Now you bring your queen to d4. You still like the idea of queen b6, right? But you're also trying to test black's patience to see what other mistakes he's gonna make, because so far black has made few mistakes. The first one being exchanging the queen to the rook, falling into the trap when queen b6 was better. Second big one was the running away with the king. So let's say black tries to cover up with knight d7 a little bit. Now, can this knight d7 cover up? Well, technically, yeah, because this queen b6 isn't happening anymore. But you can just play bishop b5, still attacking the knight. The knight b8 is just kind of already setting up for the next game, I guess. Queen b6. What are you going to try to do? Take the pawn? That's okay. We're going to still go after your other pieces. You try to play knight d7, queen d6, still attacking your knight. Now I'm very tempted to actually give a check over here, which I'm going to try and stop this temptation, because I mean it's pretty good, but king h7, I wish there were some more pawns or something more over here to attack, but that's pretty cool. Alright, let's go back a little bit. So we talked about knight d7, and someone already talked about knight e4 like some moves ago, but here is when knight e4 is also available to think about. It's more like knight e4 is trying to tempt white into taking, which is not a good idea, because take, and rook a6, and now this guy is also falling, so let's not do that. Now black is the one trying to push, and so yeah, don't follow the chess 101 rules of don't give up free pieces or pawns. Sacrifices are good, but then they're not free. There's compensation, right? So, knight e4, it's not necessarily attacking anything directly, but if you were to make some blunders or some blunders, and yeah, it's attacking stuff, so just don't do blunders. Just play queen b6. Apple pie, that's kind of my 101 rule, don't give free stuff. But that's not necessarily the 101 rule that they teach, that someone else will teach you. My 100 is to make your opponent life miserable over the board. Like, don't let him do whatever he wants. Like, if he wants to castle, stop it. If he wants to check you, stop it. If he wants to take your pieces, stop it. So, yeah, that's welcome to my chess rules, I guess. All right. Let's go back to Carlsen Wang. And yes, f3 is interesting. Oh, no. Harvey Sullivan, that is not what I'm saying. I'm saying over the board, if he wants to castle, you stop it. If he wants to push a pawn, you stop it. Stuff like that. Otherwise, those are not my advices. I actually advise against cyber bullying. It's not fun. Don't do it. Don't do it in my name, at least. Okay, let's go back to the chess. So, queen b6, what we want to consider is, let's say, what if e5? Because if not e5, what is black trying to do? Knight f6, well, then what? Knight d7, knight b8, we just saw that. Knight d6, well, queen b6, stop that. Knight c3, sure, what next? So, why not f3 instead of queen b6? I think the one thing to consider is this knight could potentially go attack from the other side, which I'm not the biggest fan of. I mean, this is like kind of desperate tries because these rooks are tied up, but it is possible. So we, I think, okay, f3 is doable. It's not a mistake, but queen b6, just, you see your opponent wants to play knight d6, you stop it with queen b6. It's just, to me, it's that easy. Hopefully I am able to explain it too. Okay, so what else we got? We are thinking about what to do after e5, right? So e5, now there is a pretty cool move. You can see that black is really under pressure, right? You can't really think of a good move because honestly, if you play bishop b5, it's pretty cool. You want to follow up with bishop c6 potentially. What if knight goes to c3 check? So that's a problem, right? So how can you prepare bishop b5 better? I think that kind of explains the move by itself. So what do you want to do with white? How can you prepare bishop b5 better? Yes, Arthur, you are correct. You kind of want this idea of bishop getting there. That is correct, but you kind of need to prepare it better. Alright, so queen c6. Pretty interesting, right? Queen c6. Queen c6 is, yeah, I like queen c6. But I think the problem is even queen c6, you're not going to take on d5 because of knight c3. And you're also not going to take on e4 because of your pawn. So queen c6 doesn't serve the purpose you want it to. And alright, so I see king f1, I saw king f3. Those are interesting, but the one thing you're still giving your opponent is the chance to check. So it's better to just play king e1 to avoid all checks possible. Right? That kind of makes sense. Okay. So thank you Archer. Yep, king e1 is the best. So after king e1, let's say black is trying to still bring this knight back in the game, right? Knight c3 doesn't make sense anymore because, well, where are you trying to go next? The rooks are tied up, so can't touch that. Something like f5, I don't really want to do that. There's so many weaknesses. The king, it doesn't make sense to bring it back right now. You just tuck the king into g8 to sleep. So, yes, thank you, Josh. White should win play if white plays carefully. Yep. So after king e1, black tries to play knight g5. I assume the idea is to simply play knight e6 and hope for knight c7 and try to still keep the position tied up. And I think this. Now we're ready to go for bishop b5, right? Just bishop b5. You are simply following up with your threat. Let's say knight e6. Be careful because if you play bishop c6, as mentioned before, there is rook a6. And you wouldn't want to just give up your pieces like that. But if this pawn was on a5, now that poses a nice question, right? If this pawn was on a5 and you play bishop c6 then, now you're winning, right? This is a super cool endgame. So, those of you who were thinking about a move such as bishop b5, bishop c6, you are correct. Just need a little bit of more preparation. That is why we do a4. And then we do a5. And next, you want to play bishop c6 and just eat that. And next is b7, that can't be stopped, like knight d8. Okay, still b7. Now this is a super easy endgame to win. Just a full piece. Okay, a bishop begins a pawn up, but that is just super winning. Okay, so that is your idea. You want to protect your pieces. Another, for those of you who have been following me for last few months that I've been constantly here, on our Twitch channel specifically, if you have seen me before for more than just an hour, you've definitely heard me talk about don't leave your pieces hanging. Like, I love to just have all of my pieces defended by something. So right now, the fact that this bishop is protected by the queen makes me happy. This pawn protecting the queen, that's just going to be ideal. First of all, if you're playing a blitz game, that eliminates the chances of you blundering. So there is another little tip. And if not, it's generally useful to have that connection between pieces. It makes them more harmonical, but in this specific situation, it also brings the trophy back home, or the win back home. I don't think this was the last round to win a trophy, but okay. So in the game, Black played rook c7 because he couldn't really, I mean, if bishop c6 happens, like if he plays something else, bishop c6 is pretty lost. So rook c7, now you still do your bishop c6. And actually right now, in this specific position, Black resigned because, well, what else to do? And let's see, if bishop c6, rook went to like a7, now you get bishop b7, right? I had other people mention this before. Was it Arthur who mentioned it a while ago? Probably, yeah. So bishop b7, and now what do you want to do? This rooks are pretty cut off. Your a7 rook is falling, and even if some check, you just go up. That's it. I mean, there is not much to it. And what else can we think about? That king e2 move. What was it? Move 20. Yeah, it was the early on deciding to play king e2 instead of castle. That was genius, even though it had the same purpose, right? To get the rook to c1. You wanted this rook to be on c1, and you couldn't decide if king e2, king d2, or castle after a5. King d2 still, like, even if your game you decide to play king e2, king d2, it's okay. It's not a bad move. It serves the same purpose of getting the rook to c1. The only issue is that it's just not tricky enough. So if you want to play more tricky, then king d2 is the better one. Now after king e2, you get this cool rook c1, and the best for Black is to actually do this rook c8, but taking is not the best choice. Queen b6 is, even though if this was a castle, now taking on c1 is the best choice. So there's so many little things to think about. But yeah. Oh, you missed the opening. It was just the Slav slash London, I guess, because it could be transposed to London from playing bishop f4 earlier too. So the opening wasn't something super. This move king e2 was something super. So yeah, also king d2, you could think about what if check. So yeah, good thinking. You're correct. You would be giving your opponent more chances to poke you and try and create better chances for himself. So good one. Thank you, Arthur. All right. So I actually did have another game prepared, but as usual, I kind of went on and on about this games. We went super deep. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you liked stuff like this, like questioning, castling, or the normal chess rules that we were taught, feel free to let me know, and I will be sure to do more like this, because I really like this kind of ideas. And I'm gonna be here for a while, not tonight, from tomorrow, so tune in our Twitch and YouTube channels for next 3 weeks. You got me. And now I'm going to log off and hand the mic to Daro to go over some endgames with you. Have fun!